All right, what's up, people? What's going on? JV Wins, Dogon SS. We are back once again for what will hopefully be another fun, entertaining, and insightful addition to the Conscious Approach channel on YouTube. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Shouts out to everybody out there who's been, checking the videos out, helping us out, feeding the algorithm, hitting those like buttons, subscribing to the channel. And if this is your first time catching wind of what we like to do here in our little corner of the internet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, hit that like button, let us know what you like or dislike about the commentary in any of the content, because we certainly appreciate the engagement. This is how we rock and roll each and every week, each and every day, each and every video upload. So we certainly appreciate everybody who appreciates us for contributing to kicking around this logical content. Thank you very much for the support as we continue to rock and roll. With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get things kicked off, man. We got a few interesting things to talk about tonight, as always. I feel like I say that every video, but I mean it every video. So,
exactly.
But the first thing that we are going to get into for this stream are comments made by Trick Daddy. Trick Daddy, who at this point is an OG hip hop veteran. He was more prolific back during our generation, 90s and early 2000s. I think nowadays he is more known for reality TV. I'm pretty sure he does Love and Hip Hop. I believe there's a Miami version, which would make sense because he is from here. So yeah, I think that's what he's more relevant for now, is being a cast member on the Love and Hip Hop Miami television reality show. But back in the day, he was pretty regarded as one of the instrumental hip hop guys who put South Florida and Miami on the map back in the day.
Right.
So, shouts out to Trick for that. But that is not the reason why we are going to discuss Trick on Conscious Approach. We are rather going to talk about Trick on Conscious Approach because of comments that he made with respect to how he identifies himself culturally. And his comments went viral because he made it very clear that he does not identify as African American. To him, he prefers to just kind of strip away the African part, and he just looks at himself as kind of like American, and he just leaves it at that. He's not really on the African American thing, and he doesn't really understand the genesis of it or where it came from. But as far as he's concerned, it's American and that's it. He's never been to Africa. He's heard it looks great, but he doesn't really think of himself in that manner. And so he's just an American. So to cap it off, I'll go ahead and recap real quick. This says, Trick Daddy explains why he doesn't identify as African American. Trick Daddy took to social media recently with a divisive take on identity and heritage that is actually more nuanced than it seems on paper. Of course, this writer is in no authoritative position to speak on this, as the topic is whether or not Black people should identify as African American. In the Love and Hip Hop alum's case, he doesn't, and he explained in a video why he has more of a connection to United States soil rather than the African American moniker that many in the Black community prefer. Also, it's important to note that this is a matter of personal identity and autonomous self-categorization, and thus is not an attack or condemnation of those who see things differently. I'm trying to figure out how Afro get in front of my MF and race, Trick Daddy posited, as a proud Miami rapper. I ain't never been to Africa. I have never been to Africa, Afro or Africa. Never been there. I'm not from Africa. I was born and raised in Goulds, Florida. I was born in Goulds, raised in Liberty City in the Pork and Beans Projects. Ain't never went to Africa. Ain't thinking about going there. And I heard it's a beautiful place. Yes. And I know it's the motherland. Yes. But not my mother, not her mother, and not her mother's mother. That ain't their land. Americans' real true land is right here on U.S. soils. Elsewhere, Trick Daddy is dealing with some other social media narratives that are even more contentious and salacious. He recently threatened to slap anyone who asked him about the Diddy parties again, insisting that he never went to any of these freak-offs. Meanwhile, Trick Daddy will probably continue to make headlines for his often outlandish and blunt takes on a whole variety of topics, such as female rappers, so on and so forth. So here is a video and audio of Trick making these comments.
I'm trying to figure out how Afro get in front of my motherfucking race. I ain't never been to Afro color. I never been to Africa. Afro or Africa. Never been there. I'm not from Africa. I'm born and raised in Goose, Florida. I'm a born in Goose, raised in Liberty City in the Poker Bean Project. I ain't never went to Africa. Ain't thinking about going there. And I heard it's a beautiful place. Yeah. And I know it's the motherland. Yes. But not my mother, not her mother, and not her mother's mother. That ain't their land. American real true land is right here in the U.S. soils.
All right, there you go. So the article goes on to say he thirsted for Glorilla in quite the explicit manner, and he also recently defended Sexy Red after feeling that many award shows snubbed her, a sentiment that the St. Louis FEMC appreciated. But in this case, it seems like this conversation around Black identity is a more personal and nuanced assessment than a headline would have you believe. So, there are Trick's comments about African American, the label rather, and how he doesn't identify as such. It's about U.S. soil, and he's never been, nor thinking about going to Africa. What do you think about what he said about, being African American or lack thereof?
I mean, it's more or less a sentiment that I agree with myself. His other stances on Sexy Red and Glorillas, separating that. I do agree with his discomfort with the term African American or Afro American or any other derivative of that. And the reason being is I feel like it's a real divisive term. I feel as though it takes away a lot of history by just slapping on African in front of American. Now, people would say that it is, related to your roots, which is the African part, so it wouldn't be taking away history, but just follow me along here. Now, if I encounter an everyday white man, and I look at this guy and, well, he's not American. He's probably got Irish roots or something, but he's just going to consider himself an American. Now, if you want to have a more nuanced conversation, he'll tell you where his ancestors come from. And then from there, he'll tell you that he's Irish. He has Irish heritage. But he's not going to be running around here saying that I'm an Irish American. He's not going to do that. He's just going to say that he's American. And I feel as though the term African American was used strategically as a divisive term to keep this whole this thing afloat, of which this wasn't our land to begin with. I really am under the mindset and, doing my own types of researches and stuff like that. The people that we do call African American, we were here for quite a long time. We inhabited North America, South America, parts of Canada, all throughout the Caribbean and other places through regular forms of migrations. And there were people here that were in the North Americas that looked like us for a long time. But when, a group of people come and, steal the land, they do have to, one of the things that they did was to separate the people mentally from the land that was once theirs. So by doing so, the term African American and other terms that are similar to that fall in that boat, and it gets the mind away from the America that was once yours. Last thing I'll say, also dealing with this divisiveness, I found myself through some rabbit holes last week looking at Mesoamerica and also South America. And they're having the same type of identity crisis going on with their community. Now, from there, we've already discussed that the Hispanic term is, that's really more or less talking about Spaniard colonization. And I found out that Latino is just Greek colonization, and that they have their own name that, of their own indigenous name, which I don't remember at this time. But they're also dealing with these labels and identities given to them by people that colonize them. So, moreover, the point I'm trying to get at is when colonization happens, you don't just colonize the land, you also have to colonize their mind and colonize their identity. And one of these forms of doing it is this label called Black, African American, and others that are used to as divisive in the mind, I would say. So I agree with Trick Daddy here. He may not have been pulling it from all these areas that I was pulling it from, but he still has a innate feeling of this ain't right. So don't call me that. Just call me American. And I agree. But what are your thoughts, Sir JV Wins, on TDD laying down saying, hey, man, I'm not this African American stuff you guys are calling me. Just call me American. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I don't think that he was thinking of it in that broad of a sense, but nevertheless, I do believe that there is a certain futility inherent in identifying as African American. Not too long ago, we did a video discussing Cameron, who basically echoed the same thing on his show with Mace, where he was trying to, as best as he could, articulate the way that he differentiates identifying as African American merely from identifying as American. And I agree with his take on that as well, which is, African American is a census designation. It's not actually a heritage identifier.
Right.
So very much like what you described, one place where I will depart with you a little bit, although I see where you were coming from, is if you ask the right person what's their heritage or where they're from, or not necessarily what's their heritage, but where are they from or what's their lineage or whatever the case may be. Most people who I run up on, they don't say I'm American. Now, granted, a lot of these people are Anglo-Saxon. Most of these people are non-white Hispanics, but they'll tell you I'm Costa Rican or I'm Peruvian or I'm Colombian or I'm Cuban or I'm Puerto Rican. Even people who were born in this country and Americanized will still nevertheless identify as such. I knew a lot of people. I even, like I once dated a girl, for example. She didn't speak a lick of Spanish. Both of her parents spoke fluent Spanish. Both of her parents were bilingual, but they Americanized the hell out of her. So she grew up straight up American. And she don't know Spanish. I don't even think she's been to Puerto Rico. But at the end of the day, if you ask her what she is, she'll tell you she's Puerto Rican. But the value inherent in that is they have an actual culture to which they can identify. The reason why it becomes a more tricky conversation and why I agree with what people like Trick Daddy and Cameron has to say is because to say that you're African American, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but to say that you're an African American is essentially to cop to your reality of being devoid of a true culture and a true heritage. And most of the people in this country, I would say, don't have to deal with that reality. Most people can say, oh, my great grandfather was from Austria, or my great grandmother was Polish, or, my aunt on my dad's side was German, Russian, so on and so forth. There's a language there's a language in a country of origin that is tethered to that identity that you can then take with you no matter where you are. So you can be in America or you can be in France, you can go to Italy, you can go to Canada, you can go to South America, you can live in Mexico, you can live in the Galapagos Islands, right? It doesn't matter where you live, you still have that sense of heritage in you because it wasn't taken away from you. Uh, uh, Melanated Americans of African descent, on the other hand, don't have that luxury because historically, the right to identifying with a language and country of origin was taken away, and so as a result, after emancipation, I'm not trying to get too historical, but after emancipation and after Reconstruction, you get to this point where it's like, well, how do we identify these people who are otherwise a lost tribe? Well, let's create a census designation so that we can identify them in terms of socioeconomic brackets and taxes. And where did we take them from? Well, we took them from Africa, from the motherland. So it fits. Let's put that on these forms so that we can keep count of them, because that's the most accurate way that we can keep track of and identify them, juxtaposed to where they fit within the tapestry of America. And that's really all African American is at the end of the day, is a census identifier. But it is in no way, shape, or form, meant to be something that you connect with in terms of one's heritage or culture. And so to that end, I'll say the same thing that I said when we initially talked about this similar topic with Cameron. I think that most of us, and you don't even have to be black, you can be from wherever, but if you don't have the benefit, the privilege of being born into a family where knowledge of these things are passed down from generation to generation, and at some point in your life you feel like you're like a lost lamb and you just want to know who you are or where you come from, I think everyone owes it to themselves, whether you're black, well, I don't care where you're from. If you're a part of America and you are, as you said in your opening statements, someone who by and large just says, oh, I'm American, but you don't really have that connection to your roots or who you are, I think everyone owes it to themselves. And I put myself in this boat. I include myself in this category as well. People need to do an ancestry, a 23andMe. People need to do something that at least gives you the opportunity to trace some sort of lineage back to who you are and your name and your family name, so that you can gain some semblance of culture. Because I think without that, it's harder to ground yourself in some value sets that can keep you, on the beaten path in terms of being a good person, a good human. So that's the lesson from this. Most people don't do that. Like, I know a lot of people, I've only known a short handful of people who fit into this boat, who don't really know who they are, but decide that they're going to do something about that. And so they investigate and they do some research. Now, at that point, you get the education and you figure out what you want to do with it. If you want to adopt some of the culture based upon some of the research that you find, and you gain some insight on where you come from, and so you want to sort of ingratiate yourself with some of those customs and ideals and beliefs, and I don't want to use the word ritual, but lack of a better word, rituals, just so that there's another aspect of community that can allow you to feel more whole as a person. I wouldn't take that away from anyone, and furthermore, I encourage everyone to do this. And just once again, in the interest of full disclosure, so that no one can call me out for being a hypocrite, this is on my list of things to do personally. I need to get to it. I've been wanting to get to it, and I'm going to get to it. But I think everyone else should get to it as well, because unless you know who you are or where you're coming from, identifying yourself via one of these hyphenated designations merely puts you in the box of being somebody who is a census designation that American can literally keep track of for taxing and economic purposes, which is what African American is at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with your heritage or culture. It's just an identifier. So I don't think Trick was coming at it from that angle either, but be that as it may, I think it's sage words if you were to pick from it the idea that everyone owes it to themselves to just do a little research and trace their lineage back to the present day, or rather to trace it back to, the origins, just so that you can gain a better sense of culture and community. And I think one of the reasons why not most, but a lot of people in today's society become a little bit wayward is at least in small part due to the fact that there is a lack of cultural grounding that they can latch themselves onto to keep them from going as wayward as they've gone. So those are some of my initial thoughts on that. Again, I don't know that Trick was looking at it from that angle, but historically, what he had to say, there is a precedent for it. So I think everybody should seek out one of these resources. You do a lot of research and you know a lot more than the average person. I would say I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I'll give myself somewhere in the 50%, in the 50th percentile. But yeah, people need to, crack open those books. There's a lot you can learn. But yeah, do a little ancestry, 23andMe, do a little, any of those things to trace, where you may have come from. And I think, doing that can give you a lot of insight and give you a little more clarity on why it doesn't make much sense for you to identify as one of these hyphenated, regional stipulations which America puts forth.
I agree. And the census designation, that's also an angle. And my thing is, I look at the emancipating yourself from mental slavery aspect, because these words do have power to them, and they put people's thought patterns and thought processes in a particular box. Because if you consider yourself, and the reason why I brought up the whole, if you run into the average everyday, white guy, and you say, hey man, where are you from? What are you? Give me your whatever. And he's going to say he's American, and but if you ask the average black person, they'll say, well, I'm African American. They got two continents on that thing. And so they're saying that they're coming from another continent. Well, so did the white guy. But he's not being forced or whatever to say he's whatever else American. And then they give Native Americans, which again is another divisive kind of thing. Okay, they're the natives of that, but who are the Americans? Well, it's not them, you're native ones. And these words signify ownership to me. And you own the country if you're an American. And if you got all these other things in front of your thing or whatever, then you're just something else. So, for the person that is Irish American, German American, whatever else American, what's the word you said? I don't know. We could throw Serbian in there.
Polish.
If they're all of these things American, then we need to, if they want to lump the Native Americans as Native Americans, well, let's just call them migrant Americans or European Americans or something.
I think those are actually terms that are used.
Migrant American,
not migrant, European American.
Well, but it's not as oftenly seen.
No,
I don't know.
No,
I don't know. I don't know if that's in a bubble sheet when I'm filling out a job application.
It's not, but neither is any of that other stuff. To your yeah.
So, but I know I see Black and African American, non-Hispanic on mine, and they got all these things going on. They got Hispanic, Black, non-white. I don't know what they got to fill out, but they got their own little bubble things that's going crazy. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that, again, if you just say that you're American, well, you feel like you have ownership of this place, this land, and all this other stuff. And the people that are running around saying that they're all these other things, well, they don't feel like it. It's like a mental thing. So if it's a white guy from South Africa, is he an African American? I'm asking you.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, if he becomes an American citizen, then yeah.
Yeah, he's an African American, but he's a white African American.
That's where it gets a little murky. Yeah.
yeah, man. So my whole thing is that these semantic games, when people playing semantics, when people splitting hairs like that, it's game behind it, is my point. And well, what's the game? What's the edge? But I do agree with you that because through separations of families and other things of that nature, through enslavement. People don't know who they, where they originally come from or any of that thing. But, there's information out there floating around. I think there's a book out there called They Came Before Columbus, where they actually talk about ships and trade routes and things that went on between Africa and the Americas. And whenever there's trading, there's intermingling, all right, inter-family breeding. So there was all kinds of stuff going on, which is why certain phenotypes here in North America differ from that in Africa. Because there was already a rigmarole shindig going down over here. And but we're taught one story in school, but there's information in books. So I'm just saying all this stuff to say is that I feel like these words are divisive and they're meant to take the ownership of America that Black people do have. Because a lot of us do have ancestry that trace back to what people call Native Americans and other things. So I would just ask people to also look into that. But yeah, I don't get on with any of these words. I use them colloquially. I use them as jokes. Because I'm not going to be around here saying other things. People need to know what I'm talking about. But as far as myself, do I run around calling myself African American? I only do it ironically. And if somebody gets it and they know me, then they'll get a good chuckle out of it. But honestly, I don't proclaim to be myself that. I don't call any of my peers or friends that, unless I'm being ironic. But yeah, so I agree with T Double D. You know what I'm saying? With Trick Diesel. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the psychological ploy is lack of an understanding. Think about it this way: like if you, it's very common, right? Like a lost dog, for example, that's been running around in the streets for as long as it's been running around. It has no home, it has no family, it has no pack. It'll latch on to the first person who's willing to give it a bowl of water and some food. Next thing you know, the dog isn't going to leave. It's going to stay there. If it's a stray dog and the dog's been stray for months and it's running around in your neighborhood and you give it water and food because you're feeling sorry for it, the next day that dog's going to be there waiting for more water and food. And that dog's going to be saying, hey, maybe this is a home for me because prior to yesterday, I wasn't given food and water. I never had a home. So I'm going to stay here hoping that these people will take me in. I think that's the analogy, or rather that's the way that I analogize lack of a heritage, or rather a lack of knowledge of heritage, and why people would so openly identify as hyphenated American, because there's no knowledge of the contrary. So, everyone wants to feel like they belong somewhere. And if you don't know where you belong, well, the easiest thing to do is I am American because I've been here my whole life. I've been socialized with these rituals and customs. I've been conditioned to believe in these tenets. I'm not going anywhere. They feed me, they give me water. So, otherwise I'm lost, and I don't want to be lost. I think intrinsically people don't like feeling lost. And I think that's the ploy. And that's where the power of these hyphenated terms come from. But knowledge of these things is what helps keep people grounded. And the last thing that I'll say, because I don't think this is a coincidence, and I don't think that it's a coincidence that people like Cameron and Trick, two Black guys, are speaking on this, because now granted, I'm not hollering causation here, but I am going to suggest correlation. And when you look at some of these, I think that knowledge of culture and language and heritage and homeland correlates to certain things like marriage rate successes and income levels, and propensities for families to be together, and propensities to perceive family units as something that is actually valued within a particular population. So, not, again, this isn't causation, but I do holler correlation, with the latest numbers. And I just looked this up real quick. Marriage rates among white people is 57%. Asian people is 63%. Hispanic is 48%, and then bringing up the rear is 33% for Black people. Marriage rates have declined for all races since 1995, except for Asians. But in 2021, the first marriage rates for Black men and women were 21.1% and 18.8%, respectively, the lowest among all races. And then if you look at income levels, Asian, the median household income, $112,800. All of this data is from 2023. So this is fairly recent data. White non-Hispanic median household income $89,050. Hispanic median household income $65,540. Indigenous people median household income 57,270 people, and then Black people are bringing up the rear, $56,490 median household income. Now, I just found these data points real quick. I just kind of thought it up off the top of my head because I think that these are data points that correlate to a cultural lack thereof, in my opinion. Because in my opinion, and this is where I do get a bit anecdotal, all of those other classifications of populations have a stronger sense of community and culture than the ones that Trick and Cameron come from. So I think knowledge of culture and community and heritage and lineage helps to keep people grounded. Is it the end all to be all? Of course not. People still go wayward. That's why, despite culture and heritage and lineage being stronger amongst Asian people, for example, you still have their marriage rates being 63% and not a number that's higher than that. So things can always go left. But if you're going to ask me whether there's a correlation between these various observations and the success rate of some of these other societal things, I would say that it exists. And it, at least in part, explains why, Black Americans, in my opinion, bring up the rear. So all that goes to say my central point that I think that additional research, just the extra initiative to gain some semblance of who you are and where you're coming from, what your country and language of origin is, can help with some of these things that we look at in the present day and say, well, what's going on? Why are we so crazy out here in these streets? That plays at least a small role in it. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that some of these other communities who are a bit more grounded have a bit less of those types of conversations than we do. So, that's the kind of thing that I kind of took away from this mainly. So I think we all owe it to ourselves to do these things. I think it's paramount. I think it will make us better and more impactful, better contributors to society. And specifically when it comes to our community, I think knowledge of these various things makes us less likely to hitch our wagon to the star of hip hop music and pro basketball and football. But, I guess that's a larger conversation for another video, but that's just initially how I feel about that one.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say, to just piggyback off that, and also just finding those things out, also finding out just because Africa is an entire continent. Figuring out which one you came from is, outside of these DNA tests type of things, do your thing, I guess. But I like to study the whole continent, because the whole continent, for the most part, they all speak the same spiritual language. They all, for the most part, had the same philosophy on life. And if you want to go back to ancient philosophies before colonizations, that would also do you a great service, because you'll see the stark contrast between the current philosophy you now have. And then you'll start to put the various blocks in place of, damn, when did we start thinking like that? Yeah. And then you might want to start, moving back to originality. Because right now, I'm telling you right now, with all of these buildings, Wi-Fi's, combustible engines, and all of this other stuff that people think is civilized, honestly, it's quite primitive. So yeah, just do yourselves a favor, man. Just look through some old ancient philosophies that went on around the world, and just see how they contrast to the current philosophies now of McDonald's and microwaves. So yeah, do yourselves a favor, man, and just look up it all. We have a very rich history, and the world knows it. About time you know it.
Shouts out to Trick and once again Cam. I had to bring back up that old video from Cam. Y'all check that out if you ever get a chance. Yeah, I don't dig the African American name either. I don't even self-identify anymore. I just say I decline to self-identify. Whenever given the opportunity, I just decline at all times because it's not a real thing. It's a statistical observation. It's not like an actual thing. Like it's not a real thing that exists. So
Until they do away with affirmative action, I'm gonna keep putting it on there because I might be the Negro hire. That's
you don't need it. You don't need it anymore because they got DEI. They got DEI now. So you don't you don't need affirmative action because corporations love y'all. So they love us. So we don't need. Yeah, you can just do it. You can decline to self-identify because DEI can be your next best friend.
And then I'll just put they them then.
Yeah.
How about that?
Go for it. Go for it. That'll get you in the room real quick.
That's what I'm saying, bro. I'm all of that. I'm they, them. I'm us.
Shouts out to Trick, man.
Yeah.